This is a personal story. My wife was, before she retired, a tenured professor at a university, post-university in Waterbury. And she'd been working there for about 4 years. She was a member of the union. It was a unionized system, the AAUP. And the union contract specified that the university could not hire a professor with the same academic credentials as another professor and pay them a different salary. It required what we guess would call today pay equity. My wife had a PhD and a couple of master's degrees, and she was teaching psychology. The university hired an individual who had a degree called a PsyD. That's a doctor of psychology, which, as I understand it, takes about half as long in the academic program. To get that degree is about half as lengthy as for a PhD. And what the university did was it then set the salary for this new hire, a person who had never taught in a university before, at $20,000 more than what my wife's salary was at that moment. And the university union decided to file a grievance under the contract. And unfortunately, the net result of that grievance was, after it went through arbitration, was that the arbitrator ruled in favor of the university, saying that the differential was somehow justifiable. My question to you is the language in this bill going to reach that kind of a situation? Would it cover, I'll start with, there are a couple of questions. I'll start with the unionized employee. If you have a union contract that is supposed to govern the relationship between the employer and the employee, will this new legislation apply to them, to those people, the union employee situation? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Porter.
Through you, Madam Speaker, no, it would not. This language would not supersede collective bargaining. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And so I assume, therefore, that many university professors and other people, school teachers, public employees are covered by union contracts, so that this would not, unless the contract specifically allowed for you to reach out beyond, and presumably it won't, otherwise the contract will be rather hard to enforce. So only non-union people would be covered by this new language. Through you, Madam Speaker. Is that correct? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Porter.
Through you, Madam Speaker, no, that is not correct.
Representative O'Neill.
Okay, so would then unionized employees be able to avail themselves of the language of the bill that is before us, to use this language to challenge a salary differential? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Porter.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker. Could you repeat that, Representative O'Neill?
Representative O'Neill, could you repeat your question, please?
Sure. Would a unionized employee, such as my wife was, be able to take advantage of the new language that is in this bill? If this bill becomes law and the same episode occurred, would she be able to use this language, go to CHRO, rather than deal with the union and the grievance process that's contained in the union contract, the collective bargaining agreement? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Porter.
Through you, Madam Speaker, I would venture to say that anyone can file a complaint. I don't think you can stop someone from filing a complaint, but I also stated that this couldn't supersede collective bargaining because there's a grievance process which you stated they went through and came to a determination. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I guess I'm confused. If after the grievance process was done, if this language were on the books, would someone in my wife's situation be able to say, okay, went through the grievance, that didn't work, I'm now going to go to CHRO and seek redress through that process? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Porter.
Through you, Madam Speaker, I would say that she does have that right. Through you.
Representative O'Neill.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. So, given the facts that I have put forward, where the professor, the newly hired professor, is being paid 25% more than, or more actually, 30% more than my wife was being paid at the time, would this would be suitable to go to CHRO? Is it your understanding that under this bill, the result should be that there should be compensation made because of that hiring decision to hire someone with lesser credential, no experience, but at a higher salary? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Porter.
Through you, Madam Speaker, anyone has the right to file. The process that CHRO would implement would be their process. I can't speak to that. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative O'Neill.
Well, Madam Speaker, I guess I'm trying to understand if the objective here is to achieve pay equity, and if a person with equal or lesser credentials is hired, and then they are paid more money, and the most obvious difference between them is one is male and one is female, is this bill intended to say that's wrong, you can't do that, you have to raise the salary of, in this case, the female professor? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Porter.
Through you, Madam Speaker, all things being equal with the work, the pay should be equal as well. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative O'Neill.
Okay, so then, just to be clear, if this circumstance, if this case were to show up in front of the CHRO, it is the intent of this legislation, if CHRO is applying the law correctly, it is the intent of this legislation to say that that case should be resolved in favor of the lower paid female professor. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Porter.
Through you, Madam Speaker, I couldn't answer that question. That would be CHRO and their internal process. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative O'Neill.
Okay. No, I guess perhaps I'm not phrasing it correctly, because if a case as blatant as the one that I've just outlined, if we can't say with certainty that this law will prevent that from happening in the future, I guess I'm not sure what it's supposed to do. What good does it do for anyone if we just don't know what the outcome is going to be, based on the facts? And I understand there may be other facts, someone would perhaps argue differently, but the facts as I presented them, you have two professors, one with experience, higher credentials, another person is hired brand new, they're given a higher salary, and it would seem to me that if we're trying to achieve pay equity, and this law is designed to achieve that the result should be that the university would be required to pay the female professor the same salary as the newly hired male professor. So I guess the question is, if that result is not the desired outcome, if that's not the intention of this bill, then I guess I'm puzzled as to why we're doing this bill. So again, I would ask the question, is that the intention of this bill, to say that at least that, whatever else might be wrong, at least that would be declared improper and inequitable? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Porter.
Through you, Madam Speaker, it wouldn't be for us to determine. That would be for CHRO to determine. They would go through an investigative process, and they would make that determination. So I can't stand here and make that determination today, Representative O'Neill. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative O'Neill.
Okay, I guess if the objective, it just seems to me in looking at this piece of legislation, at least the title of it, the objective of it is to try to eliminate discrimination between men and women, the pay gap. If someone comes along and says, okay, we're paying a female professor $60,000 a year, we just hired a male professor doing the same job with even lesser credentials. We're going to pay him $80,000 a year. And this law doesn't say that's wrong. I don't understand what this law is intended to accomplish. If there is a possible scenario under which CHRO, given those facts, as the salient facts, if the CHRO can rule the male professor gets to keep the $20,000 extra pay and the university doesn't have to pay anything extra to the female professor, I'm not sure what this law is supposed to accomplish. Who is it going to help? So let me try one more time. Is under the scenario that I have outlined, with this new law, would CHRO be able to say, should they say, based on those facts, the university is now going to have to pay the female professor an equal amount of money to the newly hired male professor? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Porter.
Through you, Madam Speaker, and I'm going to try to explain this as best as I can, Representative O'Neill. I think I'm following where you're going with this. And what we're doing is putting in place a process where if there is a situation where an employee feels that there has been bias or discrimination in their pay based on gender, that there is an option for them to go to CHRO, file a complaint, and go through that process. Now, how that process ends, I can't deem what that is, because that's the process within CHRO. So I don't know if I guess the question is, does that answer your question? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative O'Neill.
I have to respond that I don't think that it does. I thought the purpose of this piece of legislation was to reduce, this was the way it was presented, it is to reduce the wage gap between men and women. Now, there are many explanations that are offered. Women take time off for pregnancy. There's an address of that here about seniority. There's different other factors that may come into play. We talked a little bit about the job descriptions and the nature of work, and that the truck drivers and the secretaries may not be comparable. And in fact, it sounds like they probably aren't comparable, but the janitors and the maids in a hotel, they would be comparable. There are a variety of factors that one can try to point to say, this is why there is a difference between the wages of men and the wages of women. But if you have a situation in which a female professor is being paid $60,000 and a male professor is hired, never taught before, and has lesser credentials, is now going to get $20,000 a year more, and that's not considered clearly straight up wrong under this statute, if that's not inequity, if that's not something this statute is aimed to stop from happening, I'm not sure what the purpose of this statute is. Part of it is that CHRO is going to look to the legislative history, to the debate we're having here today, to the discussions that were had in the committee when this bill was heard, to give them guidance as to what it is they're supposed to do. Now, they may reach a conclusion based on our earlier discussion about truck drivers and secretaries. Okay, the legislature didn't intend for them to be treated as comparable, but they did intend for the maids and the janitors to be treated as comparable. So we'll have to find some place in between those two and draw a line. At least we've given a little bit of guidance to CHRO on that score. But we are leaving, it seems to me, CHRO with absolutely no idea as to what it is we're trying to stop from happening as a way to try to reduce the wage gap between men and women. I mean, if a university can hire a female professor for $60,000 and 4 years later hire a male professor to do the same job and pay him $20,000 more as a starting salary, and this female professor is still at $60,000, and that there's nothing wrong with that under this law, I don't know how this is supposed to combat the pay equity problem. What does it accomplish? I guess I'm just utterly puzzled. I mean, it sounds like all those people who are complaining that this is going to be a burden on business or that it's going to interfere with people are wrong. Because if that university is still allowed to do what it did, I don't know that we've accomplished anything with this statute. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative.